All right. I'm probably the only one of us tonight that has sentences, so it'll go very quickly and it'll probably be very short. She says, fat chance. No, it will. Sometimes that actually happens. Don't even bother trying to guess who the two people are tonight. I'm pretty sure most of the people in the class are not familiar with these two people. All right. You ready, Jerry? Yeah.
It's going. It's running.
I mean, for you, you're looking for. Okay. She has a commanding, proud personality, proud and powerful. Obviously, that's just a very simple sentence for Leo rising. Leonine people are just naturally commanding people. Cyrus the Great of ancient Persia was a Leo, and even as a child he marshaled all the other kids around and they took it, even the kids that were much older than him. She has enormous energy, in part because of her positive attitude about life. The Leo is the enormous energy, and the positive attitude is Leo, but so is the Sun and Jupiter together, and especially Sun and Mars. It's almost too positive. It's daring and risky.
Sun and Mars?
Sun opposite Mars.
Oh, okay.
Her impressions of the world, and she is highly impressionable, are light and bright, and there may be a tendency to personalize things. The lightness and brightness come from the Leo. The ruler of Leo, the Sun, is in Cancer, and that's impressionable, and that does like to personalize things. She sees the external world as a challenge which she can master, and when she does, it is because of her individual strength and because she loves absolutely as long as she loves. All right, we're talking here about the external world as a challenge is because of the Leo rising, and the mastery is from Leo. And it's because of her individual strength, because of the Sun, and because she loves absolutely. We're looking at Venus conjoined Pluto here, being sextile to planets in the being sextile to the ascendant. I'm sorry, Pluto is exactly sextile to the ascendant, and that's where the absolute power comes, and the absolute love comes from Venus conjoined Pluto. Her remarkable recuperative powers, again because of her positivity, which tends to be utopian, which ability to recover she will need because she is subject to accidents and intense pain. Leo is the sign when rising that has amazing recuperative powers. Again, it's because she's positive, and she's utopianly positive, meaning the Sun is in the 11th house. She'll need it because the Sun is opposite to Uranus and Mars put together, and Mars and Uranus put together are planets that produce enormous amounts of pain. Her inward attitude toward her personality is concerned with image and images, and the outer image she presents to the world is imperious and demanding. The image part comes from the Sun. Whether it's image or images, it's in Cancer, and Cancer is a very image-conscious sign. The one that she presents to the world is the rising sign. That image is somebody who's very imperial and demanding. All very simple stuff. I guess I don't even need to explain the sentences, but if I didn't explain the sentences, we wouldn't have any class. Mark, on a rare chance, do you think you know who it is?
Is she French?
No, she's...
I don't know.
She's Mexican.
Well, the French were in Mexico for a while.
Yes, yeah.
Somebody,
Actually, she is Hungarian Mexican.
no, I don't.
Ah, look at you. Yes. So, somebody knows. Frida Kahlo. Nobody knows who Frida Kahlo is. Everybody knows her by her association with her husband, which she must have just hated. She is the wife of Diego Rivera, and probably a better artist than he was. She had many accidents. She was born with a deformed spine and deformed leg, which you'd expect with the Leo rising and Pluto conjoining, sextiling the ascendant. And then she was in a trolley car accident, and she had her spine severed and her lungs punctured. It's surprising that she ever came out of it, but she did. She tries to have absolute control of her personality. Even in the variety and the expansion she seeks for it. And she does so to present, oh, I got two aesthetics in there, aesthetic standards through her personal being. The aesthetic standards is the Pluto conjoined Venus in the 10th house, which is always standards, and Venus would be aesthetic standards. The variety is from the Gemini. Expansion comes from both Jupiter and from Pluto, so where she wants the absolute control. But mostly sentence number 7 is for the Pluto sextile to the ascendant. She does see beauty in the external world, and the beauty she sees is both static and simultaneously vibrant. The Pluto is the static part, as is the fixed sign rising. It has an eternal quality about it, but because Pluto is in Gemini, there's a vibrant, back and forth, oscillatory kind of quality about it. She may be excessive about how her individual nature dominates her externalizations, and the excessiveness might seem radical and unorthodox. This is directed to the ruler of the ascendant opposite Uranus. The Jupiter part, the Jupiter conjoined the Sun that's in that opposition, is excessive. The domination is from the Sun. And she tries to dominate in a Mars-Uranus way, and that's very strange. She likes to have men in her immediate environment, and when she does, they may be men of power, social power, cultural influence, and fame. And they are also likely to be daring lovers as well as friends and comrades in arms. Having men in her environment, the Sun is masculine ruling the ascendant, but it's together with Mars, and that's very masculine. And power comes both from the Sun and from Pluto. Social power would be the 10th house. Cultural influence would be the Pluto conjoined Venus. And the power of fame, which would be the 10th house position of both of them. And she's likely to have daring lovers. The 5th house is the house of lovers. And as well as friends, the opposition runs so that friends are lovers and lovers are friends, who she sees as comrades in arms. The Mars quality in that 4-planet opposition is armed, comrades in arms. One of her lovers was Leon Trotsky. She was very much a leftist, and when he escaped the Bolsheviks in Russia, because he had to, because Lenin wanted to have him killed. In fact, Lenin did eventually have him killed. He fled to Mexico City. And her husband didn't like the fact that she had lovers within the marriage. But he couldn't do too much about it because she was a really independent woman. He didn't mind so much that she had homosexual lovers, but when she started having male lovers also, that was too much for him. He just couldn't cut it. And she probably called him a weak weenie or something like that. This is a strong personality. Her childhood, like her personality, is likely to be characterized as sensitive and impressionable. and of a self-styled spiritual nature, but it is by no means tame for all of its sensitivity. The sensitivity comes from the Cancer and from the Neptune conjoined the Sun. What it was she was in an accident when she was a child, and she was in a full body cast, except for her arm, and that's when she learned to paint. While she was in the cast, they had it set up so that she could just sort of lay there and paint while she was there. She was really a Leo rising, in that I think she did 150 some paintings in her life, which is a pretty good output. But I think almost 2/3 of them were self-portraits. Yeah, she was into her favorite person, I guess. It is important that she has this almost arrogant outward personality, because without it, her inner being might be too retiring and emotionally turbulent. This way, the consuming challenge of the without causes her to respond to the world, which may not solve the internal turbulence, but it will externalize it. All right, you see what's going on here. The Leo is almost arrogant, and the Sun opposite Mars is arrogant. But the Cancer part in the opposition goes back and forth, and when there's a water sign involved, the going back and forth is like a turbulence. So things are churned up, and in that churned up state, she might not get anything done, so it's best to go outward. All right, number 13. Because she meets the world with sincerity and willfulness, the images which form within her may be of the character of her environment, and her personality may take on the ethnic flavor of her environment. The sincerity and willfulness are associated with the Sun, and the images are obviously with Cancer, and they may be very much affected by the environment. And the 11th house is a house of international interactions, and that is the house of ethnicity. Especially Cancer is cultish almost about ethnicity. And so she took on a lot of the Indian culture of Mexico. She took it into herself, even though she had none of that heritage. Her first appearances might be of exuberant friendliness, but once one has known her longer, if one follows those appearances inward, one meets someone quite tender. The exuberant friendliness is the Jupiter conjoined Sun pouring out of the ascendant. Even the Mars opposite the Sun pouring out the ascendant is exuberant. But if you get to know her longer, and with Cancer it always takes time to get to know them, you understand that there is something quite tender. There are very few hard-hearted Cancers. Her magnanimous ebullience might be an outcropping born from an extreme utopian idealism that has inner zest, spiritual enthusiasm, and a radical freshness about it. So the outpouring, we're saying about the same thing in the first phrase of this sentence. It's an outcropping from the extreme. Oppositions usually produce extremism. And Uranus is no lily when it comes to extremism. When it's in the opposition, it means that there certainly is going to be that. I'm one of those rare cases having the Sun opposite Uranus that has no extremism in me. But the radical freshness, the enthusiasm comes from both Jupiter, Mars, all three, Jupiter, Mars, and Uranus, and the Uranus adds the radical quality of freshness. Her seemingly indomitable outer strength might be of strong spiritual and idealistic aspiration, and it now serves as a shield while she can develop her inner sensitivity. But even within, she is vulnerable to dynamic emotional onslaughts which make their way to the surface because she cannot hide her true nature even as she might like to. The indomitable strength is the Leo. and it's the result of aspiration, that is, with the Sun together with Jupiter. And it serves as a shield because the Cancer part, is very delicate and sensitive, especially with the Neptune there. And but even within, she's vulnerable because of all those oppositions. You know, those are very aggressive, attacking kinds of planets. Mars and Uranus are, you know, she's part of her is attacking her from her within. She projects light and warmth, and she can sustain a standard of beauty that is certain to bring her fame and professional influence with dominant figures, so that she will be more than just the ball of sunshine she seems. She projects light and warmth, and that's the little ball of sunshine. And she can sustain a standard of beauty. The Pluto is the sustainer, and the Venus is the beauty, and the standard again is the 10th house. And professional influence comes from Pluto. Pluto, when you have it in the 10th house, is with very powerful kinds of people, strong people who dominate in your life. And so there is something more there than just a cheery, happy person. Her pride in her forwardness has a daring, defiant quality about it that might oppose traditions or social stratification. And this might be a fiery pride to her exterior, even though she might inwardly have more tender, preservative feelings that also affect her exterior. A very complex person. What we're looking at here is we're going more into the indirect things. The daringness and the defiance is the opposition that is coming from Mars and Uranus. It might oppose traditions. The Capricorn part is the traditions. And so social stratification is also from Capricorn. And this might bring a fiery pride, because Mars and Uranus are extremely fiery, even though she may have an inwardly more tender and preservative feelings. The Cancer is the tender part. The preservative comes from both Jupiter and from Cancer. There's redundant keywords there that also reflect into her interior. So it's a pretty complicated individual. I like her painting. I like everything she did. She's quite a good social figure. While I was in Ecuador, my host in Ecuador had a big book about her life and her paintings, and it was in Spanish that even I could read. Her pride, all right. Some of this spirited rebellion and creative liberty. Oh, I don't know, there's something there. And the imperious conceit that issue from it might seem cruel or even like psychological toying to the external world. Strong, determined personalities often do not know how strong they are or how they appear to the world. Most of this has to do with Leo. The spirited rebellion is obviously the oppositions to Mars and Uranus. And so are the creative liberties. Both the 5th and the 11th house are creative houses, but there's an imperious conceit. There's a certain amount of egoism that comes from all of this. And the Sun, when afflicted, especially with Leo rising, is likely to seem cruel. Or she seems like she's playing with things. Leo, like the way a cat plays with a mouse, and with the Sun being opposite the planet in the 5th house, which is the house of toys, it might seem that way. And this is again Leo rising. She doesn't know how strong she is. The sign that's least likely to understand how much stronger that it is than others is Leo. Number 19, one of the strongest factors in her appearance might be a tendency to scowl, sneer, and roar at the world like a wounded animal, fierce and feral. a personality brimming with creative energies set on overturning staid traditional values may beam out no matter how strong the will to hold herself is in an artistic archetype. The dashed phrase there is trying to relate very disparate parts of the personality. The strongest factors is the sun afflicted, likes to scowl and sneer and roar. And because the sun is so afflicted by those oppositions, she is like a wounded animal. But nonetheless, the energy that is released in those afflictions is very, very strong. And again, because a lot of it issues from Capricorn, it's trying to overturn traditional values. And the will, talking about both Pluto and the sun, may not be able to contain it. Our artistic archetype is from Pluto conjoined Venus in the 10th house. Thus, she may be inwardly concentrating on incubating images of ideals for their own sake. Her inability to control her own youthful charge might poison it, and she might be seen as manic or haughty. Manic she certainly is. The manic part is the Sun, Mars, and Uranus in affliction. Those are the three planets likely to be manic, and if you have all three of them in one combination, you've got a really manic type of person. She's trying to incubate images. That's the Sun in Cancer, is trying to incubate images, and they're of a utopian nature. She's trying to bring heaven to earth here. With a ruler of the ascendant in the 11th house. She might seem a dazzling light, which is at the same time oscillating with electric rapidity, that might be famous and admired, but it is best done so at a distance. This is not somebody you want to tangle with. The dazzling light is the Leo rising, and the sun opposite Uranus certainly is a dazzler. The oscillation comes from the opposition, and it comes from the planets in Gemini. The electric rapidity obviously comes from Uranus. All right. Yes?
Just a question on the details.
Yep.
You said she had her spine severed?
Yep.
So she was paralyzed then?
No, she was not paralyzed. The cord wasn't broken. The column was broken.
Oh, okay.
So it was weldable, and she did manage to live a fairly normal life despite all of those things. All right, the next one I don't think anybody is going to get. Mark, that's a challenge.
You mean the next horoscope?
Yeah.
Nostradamus?
No. I think it's pre-Nostradamus. Though they might have known each other. This person knew everybody that was worth knowing, so Now the first 5 sentences describe this person's life or outward personality almost to a T. This is a personality that believes almost anything with a peculiar openness to new things. The Cancer rising is a very believing personality, and the Uranus conjoined the ascendant is very open to anything new. Second sentence, this is a personality which doubts almost anything with an emotional dyed-in-the-wool kind of doubt established in the past. This sentence is not talking about Uranus in Cancer on the ascendant. This sentence is talked about Saturn in Cancer conjoined the ascendant from the 12th house. It doubts almost anything if it's on the ascendant. It's emotional because it's in Cancer, and it's a dyed-in-the-wool kind of thing. It's a very fixed thing, but it's an emotional doubt. and it's been established in the past because of the 12th house. This is a personality which tries to fuse belief and doubt, a personality which seems refreshingly old-fashioned. So we have here the belief and doubt are Uranus and Saturn, and the fusion of them comes in the conjunction, which is a very good keyword for the conjunction. And she seems refreshingly old-fashioned. The refreshing part comes from Uranus, and the old-fashioned part comes from Saturn. This is a personality which mentally introspects about everything, and it receives from the external world with a brooding quality of introspection. Now we're talking about the ruler of the ascendant, and this is, I don't know all the indirect influence from the ruler is every bit as strong as the planets on the ascendant. Introspect is Virgo, and the moon is the ruler of it, and so it's a very mental kind of thing, and it receives from the external world. The moon rules the ascendant with a brooding quality. The brooding quality is from the 4th house, and the introspection is, again, the Virgo. Got any guesses? Mark? He invented a literary form all by himself, a literary form that nobody else has ever almost come to equal him in.
This wasn't Augustine, was it?
No. He's churning away. He probably Judith may know it, but I doubt it. All right. This is a personality which thinks and writes with depth and precision, also with feeling about every impression from the external world. The thinking and writing, and we're talking now about the planets, especially Saturn on the ascendant, being trine to Mercury. It writes and thinks with depth, and that's what Mercury-Saturn things do. And the Mercury-Saturn is precision. Also with feeling, because both planets in the trine are in water signs, about every impression from the external world. So nothing escapes this person. He traveled a lot, Mark. Yeah, I think he knew most of the European kings in his time, and I think was benefited by them. This person must be very careful about what he eats because his body is sensitive and his digestion is slow and does not function well. There's a well missing there. He should be especially careful of spicy foods, meaning the Uranus part is the spicy foods, and the Saturn part is the slow digestion that doesn't want to work right. Some people believe actually that when people have indigestion, that sets up a state of consciousness, that displeasure that a person tries to write or create in order to smooth over the displeasure. And there's something like that that could be going on here, but I didn't put that in the sentences. He is awed by things in the external world, especially things in nature, because he has such an original curiosity. The awing is Uranus, the external world is the 1st house and the ascendant. Nature is Cancer in the 1st house, and he has an original kind of curiosity. The Uranus has the curiosity, but even Mercury working through Saturn indicates a kind of curiosity. So it's got emotional curiosity and mental curiosity. Got it, Jerry?
Not yet.
No, it'd be a hard one to get. This is the one that separates the men from the boys, Mark.
Was he also kind of a mathematician or not?
No. No, he became a religious figure later on. In fact, what is described in the Ascendant is the religious movement that he started. He was not born as a Catholic, but he ended up as a Catholic. And I forget the name of it, but it is a religious movement where you doubt so you can believe better. And this is the beginning of the Renaissance kind of thinking. No, no. It's a Renaissance kind of thinking. That's when the mind started coming and all kinds of doubt came in, and the belief had to be a totally different kind of belief ever after that. Do you know who it is? Oh, you don't? Well, you got to make some bookshelves is what you need to do. And if you do, put this person's book on it. You can still get it. Can you imagine that? A book that's 5 centuries old, and you can still, from a writer from 5 centuries ago, and you can still get it. All right. Family tradition, ancestry, and well-established conditions from before his birth offer him great freedom if he can overcome his clannish feelings. We're talking about the conjunction here again, but the family tradition is obviously Saturn in Cancer, as is the ancestry, and the conditions established before birth are the 12th house conditions. They offer him freedom. That is, the energy goes from Saturn forward toward Uranus, and he has a lot of freedom. If you have money, you can be. I believe he was born into nobility. Provided he can overcome the clannish feelings, and the clannish feelings come from Cancer. Saturn there especially is likely to be clannish. Hi, kitty. Hi, kitty.
I see they painted over that white stripe.
Yeah. It's a nice kitty. I like the... yeah. He's likely to have an odd early childhood education, and as a consequence, he might appear to the world as an eccentric, which he would secretly find embarrassing and limiting to his personal esteem. Talking again about that conjunction on the ascendant, the odd early childhood education comes from Uranus. As I recall, there was some kind of mixing of families in there, and he did have an unusual early childhood education. And he'll appear to the world as odd and eccentric, is what you'd expect with Uranus in the first house, which he would find embarrassing. The Saturn part, which wants the dignity, that's behind the scenes, so he would secretly find that embarrassing and limiting to his personal esteem. If you're embarrassed, you automatically limit yourself. The subjective parent has a lot of influence in the formation, and because there are differences and divisions between both parents, his peculiar personality might develop fixated and escapist imagination as a means to cope with inharmonious parental influence. All right, you understand what we're talking about here. The subjective parent is the 4th house. And since it rules the ascendant, it has a lot of influence in the whole formation. But there are differences. The moon is opposite to the sun and Neptune in the 10th house, which is the other parent. And when there are oppositions between parents, people develop either a lot of subtlety or they develop some kind of escapism. And in his case, there is a tendency to escape into the 4th house and to cope with those inharmonies. All right.
Question.
Yes, sir.
Just about his name. Though he was born in France, does he have a French name?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
French first name and last name.
Right. Just want to know.
Okay. You got it, Judith? Do you read a lot of essays? Have you ever read Emerson's essays?
Not recently.
Emerson modeled his essays on the essays of this man. Some of his essays were travel log. He wrote about anything. He wrote about anything and everything. And it was such a personal literary form that I believe it was Darwin that said later on, the essay is a form of writing that you can say anything about anything and get away with it because it's a personal reflection. You got it? Ah, could you? He has the first initial as he has the second initial.
Rousseau?
No, his first name is Jean. Jean-Jacques. Yeah, but J.R. Okay. It's difficult to tell whether his ingenious personality is a consequence of his sensitive discrimination, which feels things out, or a rebellion from heritage he found too staid, or to experiencing sudden changes in his environment, which perhaps occurred during travel. Talking about the planets on the first house again. It's an ingenious personality. Sensitive discrimination is the lunar part, which is very sensitive in its discrimination, especially with the opposition to Neptune, or a rebellion from a heritage he found too staid. The rebellion would be the Uranus rebelling against the Saturn part, because it doesn't like to be in that staid traditionalist way of looking at things, or to suddenly experience changes in his environment, which would be just plain Uranus in the first house, which could perhaps occur during travel. That's bringing in the fact that Uranus rules the ninth house and that Mercury aspects the planets from the ninth house. I think the Beatles have a title to one of their songs that is the same as his first name. This is kind of fun. Not got it yet, huh? All right. In fact, I think when it is sung, I think it is, I can hear it in my consciousness, and I think it is Paul McCartney sings a solo of it, and it's a sort of a strange, using those augmented or diminished chords, and it sort of hangs in the air. All right, his first impressions of things might be startling, and he may hold them and ruminate on them and carry them in his subconscious as peculiar images. The first impressions are Uranus, right in the first house, the startler. Holding them comes from the Saturn in Cancer, and the rumination comes from Saturn in Cancer as well as from the moon in the fourth house, which is the subconscious, where he carries them as peculiar images. The Cancer is very imagic. He has a unique style of presenting himself to the world, but it is not haphazard. Instead, it is more displayed in his attire in an assortment of things sentimental to him. Meaning to say that the clothes that he wears are a collage. Of course, we would look at them as rather traditional clothes, but if you see pictures of him, he's dressed, like all sorts of things pinned on kind of quality. His personality thrives in nature settings, and he sees nature as pure and as an expression of creation, even its limits. This person wrote on nature probably as beautifully as Thoreau did, and probably expanded much further than Thoreau did. The Cancer is what we're talking about, likes the nature things, and the creation is the Uranus part of it, and the purity has that quality. Even the limits he likes, and that's the Saturnine part. His approach to things is novel, approach meaning the first house, but it is orderly, meaning Capricorn, and the novelty is Uranus, although his conception of order might be a bit peculiar and personally fussy. And there we're talking about the moon in Virgo, which is peculiar and fussy about things being organized. His personality is easily stimulated, and the lightning strokes from without are sustained in his feelings with almost masochistic intensity because he requires that to brood over them. This is, when things strike you extremely strongly and you hold them in your consciousness, then you can form words around them, and you can form very lovely concepts. And that apparently was the way that things work for him. The lightning strokes are obviously Uranus and being struck by unusual things in the environment. And his willingness to hang on to them, that's the Cancer is the masochistic sign in that kind of receiving and holding. His genius comes from direct, raw experience, but it is not a radical departure from accumulated culture, because he endeavors to integrate it with things of the past, because he believes in tradition, and because he has a basically conservative and preservative personality. He does this even with new things don't fit in with the past. So his writing might very well be an attempt to take new things that are out of the ordinary, and by writing assimilate them into what we know from the past. That's a very good way that a lot of people write that way, because they don't know what to do when they've had an experience. Raw experience is Uranus in the first house. It's not a radical departure because Saturn is in that conjunction, and it holds things in from the past. And Saturn is well aspected, so he really believes in tradition. And he is basically a conservative and preservative personality. All right. This is a personality that tries to feel its way through life. Some of the feelings are sharp, some are blunt, but all are valued as his subjective personal being. All right, Cancer on the ascendant, somebody that's trying to feel their way through life, almost like a blind person groping along. Some of the sharp feelings are the Uranus part, and the blunt ones, the dull, continuous pains, are Saturnine, but he likes them all. His values, Mercury is in the 10th house, his values are emotional. He likes all of those different kinds of emotions. The subjectivity comes from both from Cancer and from the moon being in the 4th house. Got it now, Mark? His feelings are conceptualized in thoughts and in words, but not for the truth of the thoughts or the words, but to expose and to convert the world to his relative view, in which his personality, which his personality feels is true. His mind with his thoughts and words serve his feelings, which are paramount to his personality. All kinds of things in water here. A lot of what we're talking about is the Mercury in water, trining the planets on the ascendants. His feelings are conceptualized in thoughts, meaning to say that both through the moon and Virgo, or through the trines to Mercury, there is a conceptualization. The conceptualization is a more abstract quality that's more like the Mercury in the 9th house. But he's not particularly interested in the truth of the thoughts or in the words. He's just trying to expose, he has wonder himself about what he's seeing, and he's trying to convert the world to his sense of wonder about what he sees around him. And the feeling is the all in that process. And so his mind, though it's a very good mind, it serves the feelings because the feelings are most important to this person. Got it, Judith? His personality is fraught with intuitions, all of which are a consequence of first-hand experience, and all of them have a factual component if one realizes that emotions and feelings are facts just as much as mathematical data are facts. Nothing too hard in that. The personality is fraught with intuitions, Uranus in the first house, and all of them are a consequence of first-hand experience. It's because he's mixed things up with the world through the first house, and all of them have a factual component, and the factuality comes from the Mercury part in Virgo and from the Mercury in the trine to Saturn, but the facts are emotions. Even Saturn there in Cancer there sees each little quantum of emotion as a fact, and that's his life. He is good about bookkeeping his emotions as some people are about their thoughts or about the physical objects they own. Got it, Jerry?
Does the name begin with a C?
No.
I don't.
Okay. You got it? No. You never took the history of the essay course.
Julie would probably have it by now.
What?
Julie would have it by now.
I'm not sure. She might. Luana's got MFA in literature too, or in writing, creative writing. All right. Outwardly, he might seem to be moody and excitable if his moods are suddenly disrupted, but his ruminant moods are productive of religious, moral, or philosophical concepts which are dear to him. The moodiness comes from Cancer, especially Saturn in Cancer is moody. If they're disrupted, meaning Uranus comes in, he's excitable if Uranus enters into it, but his ruminant moods, meaning either the moon in the 4th house or the 12th house Saturn, which is also goes behind the scenes and pores over things, and it's trying to the Mercury in the 10th, which is religious or moral philosophical concepts. Oh, we're coming down to your last chance, Mark. You wouldn't want to have to wait all the way until September for. Though his personality is coy and sometimes unpredictable, it is not insincere unless in his personal preferences he superstitiously confuses subjective things with objective things because he wants it that way. And he was guilty of that, I believe. The coy personality is Saturn in Virgo. It can be shy, but sometimes it's a feigned shyness. What? The Saturn in Cancer. Saturn in Cancer can be shy, but sometimes it can feign shyness and in that coy way get its way. It can manipulate in that way. The unpredictability is obviously from Uranus. It is not insincere because there's enough Saturn there that indicates that there is sincerity. His personal preferences, he superstitiously confuses subjective with objective things. We're talking here about the opposition of the moon to Neptune, which is superstition, and the moon is in the 4th house, subjective, and the Neptune is in the 10th house, objective. And it's because he desires things that way, and that's probably the solar part of the opposition, because he wants things in a particularly given way. Questions?
What did he do?
He wrote. He traveled and he wrote. He was well enough to do. That's what we said in the early sentences there. From his parents he inherited enough, and I think he did have another profession or something like that. You know who it is? Do you want to wait until September? Or,
Could we just have the name of his book?
there really isn't a name of it. Well, there is a name, but it's a glorified thing in which essay is one of the words. He wrote a number of books. When he got into his religious philosophy business, he wrote quite a bit. I can tell you his first name. Michel.
Well, I knew you were thinking of Michelle when you talked about Paul McCartney, because that's the only one you talked about, but I didn't know that that was a man's name.
Yeah. Yeah, in France it is. Got it, Mark? Oh. I figured nobody would get it. It's Michel Montaigne, which lights up all kinds of eyes.
Yeah. Who cares?
This is your summer assignment. Your summer assignment is to read all of the essays by Michel Montaigne.
Oh, so this is the last one?
This is the last one. Give me a call when it gets to be August or September, and this is the assignment. Now you've got all summer to write questions on the first emotionalities. That's on the Anais Nin and the Eugene McCarthy. We're going to talk about the emotionality, so you got all summer to do it. And I expect at least 15 sentences.
Sure. I never heard of him, so I couldn't,
No.
wouldn't have known.
Yeah, only literary types know him.
And as you know, I'm not very much of a literary type.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. We've made it 2/3 of the way. Unless we get down to 2 people, I think we'll continue all the way out to the end.